California sells itself hard. The beaches, the redwoods, the highways, the sunshine, the national parks that everyone photographs from the same three overlooks. And most of it is real. But the state has been hiding things, places that don't show up in travel guides, places that shouldn't exist, and places that make you stop and ask who thought this was a good idea. These are the 15 unreal places in California you won't find on Google Maps. Place 15, Forestier Underground Gardens, Fresno. Off Highway 99 in Fresno, beneath a nondescript plot of land on Shaw Avenue, there is a world that most people drive past without knowing it exists. The Forestier Underground Gardens are a 10-acre network of rooms, tunnels, grottos, and courtyards, all hand-carved underground by one man over 40 years using nothing but shovels and picks. That man was Baldassare Forestier, a Sicilian immigrant born in 1879. He came to California in the early 1900s to grow citrus. He bought 80 acres in Fresno. Then he discovered that the summer heat was nearly unbearable. The soil was hardpan, a dense sedimentary rock, and his citrus dreams were essentially dead on arrival. Most people would have sold and moved on. Forestieri started digging. He carved rooms going as deep as 25 feet below the surface. He built an underground kitchen, a bedroom, a chapel, a fish pond, and even an aquarium with a glass bottom. He designed skylights so that grapevines and fruit trees could grow underground and still reach the light. Dozens of species, some grafted to produce 7 different types of citrus on a single tree. Many of those trees are still alive today, over a century after he planted them. He never officially opened the resort he imagined. He died in 1946 of pneumonia, still working and still adding to the space. The gardens were opened to the public as a museum and were designated a California Historical Landmark in 1978. Tours run most of the year and take about an hour. Lynn Forestier Kosevsky, Baldassare's great niece and owner of the gardens, has said, "He understood that it was cooler underground from the cellars back in Sicily. He just kind of wanted to get out of the Fresno heat." Place 14, the Integratron, Landers. About 20 miles north of Joshua Tree National Park, in the tiny community of Landers, there is a 38-foot-tall white wooden dome sitting alone in the Mojave Desert. No metal, no nails, built entirely from wood, joined with wooden dowels and adhesive. It looks like a spacecraft that landed quietly and has been waiting there ever since. The Integratron was built by George Van Tassel, an aeronautical engineer who had worked for Lockheed, Douglas Aircraft, and as a test flight inspector for Howard Hughes. By the early 1950s, Van Tassel had moved his family to the Mojave Desert, where he lived beneath a 7-story freestanding boulder called Giant Rock and began conducting weekly meditation sessions. In August 1953, Van Tassel claimed that a being from the planet Venus landed nearby, woke him up, invited him aboard, and gave him blueprints for a machine capable of rejuvenating human cells, defeating gravity, and enabling time travel. Whether you accept that story or not, Van Tassel spent the next 18 years building the structure according to those plans. He financed it largely through his annual Giant Rock interplanetary spacecraft conventions, which drew as many as 11,000 people a year at their peak. Van Tassel died in 1978, weeks before the planned opening, and the machinery intended for the interior was never installed. The building was eventually purchased by 3 sisters, who restored it and listed it on the National Register of Historic Places in 2018. Today, it operates as a sound bath venue. Visitors lie on mats while practitioners play 22 quartz crystal singing bowls, whose resonance fills the dome in a way that acoustics experts describe as genuinely unusual. Robert Plant, Moby, Arcade Fire, and the Arctic monkeys are among the acts that have reportedly signed the guest book. Place 13, Salvation Mountain, Imperial County. In the Sonoran Desert of Imperial County, about an hour and a half from Palm Springs, there is a 50-foot hill painted in every color imaginable. Flowers, birds, trees, hearts, rivers of color running down the slopes, and at the top, a white cross and the words, "God is love." This is Salvation Mountain, and it was built by one person. Leonard Knight was born in Vermont in 1931, served in the Korean War, and spent years in the 1970s trying to launch a homemade hot air balloon painted with a religious message. The balloon kept failing. In 1984, he found himself at the edge of the California desert near Neeland, intending to stay for a week and leave a small concrete monument. He stayed for nearly 3 decades. The mountain is made of adobe bricks, hay bales, discarded tires, car windows, old telephone poles, and thousands of gallons of donated paint. Knight used to spend half a day at a local dump to find enough usable paint to work with. He lived in a converted truck on site, gave free tours, and maintained the structure continuously because the desert sun and sand were always working against him. The Folk Art Society of America declared it a folk art site worthy of preservation in 2000. In 2002, California Senator Barbara Boxer described it on the floor of the U.S. Congress as a unique and visionary sculpture, a national treasure, profoundly strange and beautifully accessible. It was designated a historically significant property by Imperial County in January 2024, protecting it from development, a designation that came in part because Salvation Mountain and the surrounding Slab City area face ongoing pressure from industrial interests. Knight died in 2014. Volunteers now live at the site and maintain the mountain. It remains open daily from dawn to dusk, free of charge. Place 12, Slab City, Imperial County. Half a mile from Salvation Mountain, on a 640-acre former World War II Marine training base called Camp Dunlap, a community has been living rent-free on state-owned land since the base was decommissioned after the war. When the military left, they removed everything, except the concrete slabs that the barracks and Quonset huts had rested on. People came to camp on those slabs, and they never fully left. Slab City has no power grid, no sewer, no running water, no garbage collection, and no building codes. It operates entirely outside the normal civic systems. Residents, a rotating mix of permanent squatters, seasonal snowbirds, artists, veterans, retirees, and people who have decided for various reasons that they are done with the standard arrangement, build what they build, live how they live, and maintain a self-governing community of somewhere between 150 and several hundred people depending on the season. It also has a library, a performance stage called The Range, which hosts open mic nights and concerts under the desert sky, various art installations scattered across the flat expanse, and it borders Salvation Mountain, which gives the whole area a kind of accidental coherence as one of the stranger square miles in the American West. People have been predicting Slab City's eventual demolition for decades. There are periodic proposals to develop or clear the land. So far, none have succeeded. The slabs remain. So do the people. Place 11, Bombay Beach, Salton Sea. The Salton Sea is not a natural lake. It was created accidentally in 1905 when an irrigation canal from the Colorado River broke and flooded a desert basin for 2 years. The resulting body of water, 15 miles wide, 35 miles long, became a resort destination by the 1950s, attracting Frank Sinatra, the Beach Boys, and Bing Crosby to lakeside hotels and yacht clubs. Then the salinity rose. Then the fish died by the millions. Then the birds died eating the fish. Then toxic dust began blowing from the exposed lake bed as water levels dropped. By the 1980s, the resort towns on its shores were largely abandoned. One of them was Bombay Beach. What remains of Bombay Beach, a few hundred permanent residents, decaying waterfront structures, a bar called the Ski Inn where the walls are covered in dollar bills, was supposed to be a cautionary tale. Instead, since around 2011, it has become an open-air art destination. Artists moved in and built large-scale sculptures, murals, and installations throughout the abandoned structures and lots. There is a drive-in theater made from found objects. There is a piano submerged in what used to be the beach. The annual Bombay Beach Biennale, which has run since 2016, draws international artists to the site every year. The smell of the Salton Sea is described by the U.S. Geological Survey as objectionable, noxious, unique, and pervasive. The art is genuinely excellent. Place 10. The Sunken City, San Pedro, Los Angeles. In the Point Ferment area of San Pedro, on the southern edge of Los Angeles, there is a section of coastline where the road simply ends in midair. Below the cliff edge, tilted concrete foundations, broken sidewalks, rusted piping, street curbing that now points at the Pacific Ocean. This is the Sunken City, what remains of a residential neighborhood that slid into the sea beginning in 1929. The land in that area was developed in the 1920s on what turned out to be unstable bentonite clay. Nobody properly investigated the geology before building. A crack appeared in early 1929 after heavy rains. By May, the Los Angeles Times was reporting that the land was moving, and the Board of Public Works was advising residents to evacuate. At its peak, the ground was dropping at 11 inches per day. Some homes were relocated. A few went into the ocean. The sliding land took the road, the Pacific Electric red car rail tracks, and the sidewalks with it. The area has been technically closed to the public for decades, surrounded by fencing and no trespassing signs. It has also become one of the most heavily graffiti-covered outdoor galleries in Los Angeles, visited regularly by locals who navigate the fencing regardless of the warnings, and used as a film and photography location. The concrete ruins along the cliff have been painted and repainted for years. The land is still moving. Nearby sections of Paseo del Mar collapsed again in 2011. The geology underneath the Palos Verdes Peninsula is deeply and chronically unstable, and no amount of signage has changed that. Place 9. Pioneer Town, San Bernardino County. In 1946, a group of Hollywood investors and actors, among them Roy Rogers and Gene Autry, built a functioning Old West town in the high desert outside of Yucca Valley, about 20 miles north of Palm Springs. The plan was to use it as both a working movie set and a place where cast and crew could live during productions. They called it Pioneer Town. The main street, Main A Street, was built with functional saloons, a bowling alley, a jail, and storefronts, all practical enough to serve a real community while looking authentically like the 1880s frontier. Over 50 Hollywood productions were filmed here between 1946 and the mid-1950s, including episodes of The Cisco Kid and Gene Autry's television series. The productions moved on. Pioneer Town didn't. Permanent residents moved into the buildings and have been there ever since. Today, approximately 350 people live full-time in Pioneer Town. There are horses, there is a functioning general store, and there is Pappy and Harriet's Pioneer Town Palace, a barbecue restaurant and music venue that opened in the former cantina in 1982 and has become one of the more legendary small music venues in Southern California. Paul McCartney, Vampire Weekend, Robert Plant, and Norah Jones have all played there. The town still looks like the 1880s. Most of the buildings are original. The desert light hits the wooden storefronts in a way that is either exactly right for a film set or exactly right for a real town, and at this point, it is genuinely hard to tell which it actually is. Nobody seems particularly bothered by that distinction. Place 8. The ancient bristlecone pine forest. White Mountains, Inyo County. On the eastern side of California, in the White Mountains above the Owens Valley, at elevations between 9,800 and 11,000 feet, there are trees that were alive when the Egyptian pyramids were being built. The ancient bristlecone pine forest is home to the oldest individual trees on Earth. The oldest confirmed living tree in the world, a bristlecone pine named Methuselah, grows in the Schulman Grove section of this forest and is over 4,800 years old. Its exact location is not publicly disclosed to protect it from damage or vandalism. A nearby tree called Prometheus, which was cut down in 1964 by a researcher who did not realize its age at the time, was confirmed at 4,862 years old, and is thus the oldest tree ever to have been documented. That particular decision did not go down well in the scientific community, and it is still brought up. The trees look nothing like what most people expect. They are small, gnarled, and twisted by millennia of wind and freezing temperatures at altitude. Their wood is so dense and resinous that it resists decay for thousands of years after death. Bleached, dead trunks of bristlecone pines can persist on the mountain for 10,000 years. The living trees grow no more than an inch of new wood per year. The forest is located about 4 hours from Los Angeles, sitting above the Owens Valley, the valley on the wrong side of the Sierra Nevada from most California tourists, and receives a fraction of the visitors it deserves. The trail through Schulman Grove is roughly 4 miles round trip and open late spring through early autumn. Place 7, Nitwit Ridge, Cambria. In the coastal town of Cambria, on a hillside above the Pacific, there is a house built almost entirely from junk. Abalone shells pressed into walls, old car parts used as architectural supports, toilets repurposed as planters, beer cans, tiles, rocks, pipes, and whatever else Arthur Harold Beale, known locally as Captain Nitwit, could collect over the 5 decades he spent building it. Beale was a garbage collector and handyman who began construction on his hillside property in 1928. He had no formal training in architecture or engineering. He worked by instinct and with whatever materials he could find, which, given his profession, was quite a lot. He continued building and adding to the structure until shortly before his death in 1992 at the age of 96. The house has several levels, connected by hand-built staircases, with views over the town and the coast below. Nitwit Ridge was designated a California Historical Landmark in 1981, placing it in the same formal category as historic missions, military forts, and significant civic buildings. It is a quiet acknowledgement from the state that something worth preserving had been built here, even if it was built from toilet bowls and beer cans. Beale reportedly never asked for recognition and was generally described by neighbors as a cheerful, tireless eccentric who simply could not stop building. Tours of the property are available, run by the family that purchased it after Beale's death and has maintained it with evident care. Place 6, Lassen Volcanic National Park, Northern California. Most people, when they think of California's volcanic landscape, think of the dramatic coastline, or Death Valley, or the Sierra Nevada. Very few think of Lassen Volcanic National Park in Shasta County, which is arguably one of the most geologically unusual places in the continental United States and the most consistently overlooked national park in California. Lassen Peak is the southernmost active volcano in the Cascade Range. It last erupted between 1914 and 1921, producing a series of explosions that sent ash as far as 200 miles and left the surrounding landscape scarred and reshaped in ways that are still clearly visible today. The park contains all 4 types of volcanoes found on Earth: shield, plug dome, cinder cone, and composite, making it the only place on Earth where all 4 exist within a single compact area. Within the park is a hydrothermal area called Bumpass Hell, named after a local guide named Kendall Bumpass, who broke through the thin crust into a boiling mud pot in 1865 and had to have his leg amputated. That contains the park's largest geothermal field. Boiling springs, fumaroles, steaming vents, and bubbling sulfuric mud pools line the boardwalk trail. The whole place smells roughly like a combination of rotten eggs and geologic time. Yellowstone draws around 4 million visitors per year. Lassen draws roughly 500,000, a fraction of that, despite offering a hydrothermal and volcanic experience that is, by any reasonable measure, comparable and considerably less crowded. Place 5, the Lost Coast, Humboldt and Mendocino counties. California's Highway 1 is one of the most famous coastal roads in the world. But there is a stretch of the Northern California coast so rugged and mountainous that even Highway 1 was rerouted inland to avoid it. That section, roughly 80 miles of it, running through southern Humboldt and northern Mendocino counties, is called the Lost Coast. The terrain is the reason. The King Range Mountains rise steeply from the ocean, creating cliffs and slopes too severe to build or maintain a road. The area was largely logged in the early 20th century. The population declined, and then the land was left alone. The Bureau of Land Management and California State Parks now manage most of it. Access requires hiking. The main route, the Lost Coast Trail, runs 25 miles along the beach from Matsley Beach in the north to Black Sands Beach near Shelter Cove in the south. Hikers have to time their passage around certain sections based on the tide, because some stretches of the trail are completely impassable at high water. The beach is black sand, volcanic in origin, backed by the steep green walls of the King Range. There is no cell service. There are very few trail markers. There are Roosevelt elk wandering the beach. Sea lions haul out on the rocks offshore. Black bears live in the King Range backcountry, which makes camp food storage a practical concern rather than a theoretical one. If what you want is California coastline without the California crowd, the Lost Coast is the answer, though it will make you work for it. Place 4, the subway tunnels under Los Angeles, downtown LA. Beneath the Hall of Records on Temple Street in downtown Los Angeles, behind an unassuming door and accessible via elevator, is a system of underground tunnels that once connected the city's civic buildings to each other. Built during the 1920s and 1930s as a functional network for city employees and utility infrastructure, the tunnels fell out of regular use but were never demolished. The tunnels are officially closed to the public. The City of Los Angeles uses some sections for maintenance access and seismic monitoring. Various sections have appeared as film locations over the years, given that they offer the rare combination of age, scale, and authenticity that is hard to replicate on a set. And despite no trespassing restrictions, the tunnels have accumulated a significant subterranean street art gallery, covered in layers of paint from visitors who have found their way in over the decades. What makes the tunnels worth knowing about is their age and extent. Downtown Los Angeles, built rapidly in the early 20th century, invested in civic infrastructure that most people living above it now have no idea exists. The tunnels run beneath streets that carry thousands of cars daily, connecting buildings that are in active use. The city occasionally authorizes organized tours for specific cultural events. Outside of those windows, access is, to put it gently, a matter of local knowledge. Place 3, MacArthur Burney Falls, Shasta County. Theodore Roosevelt reportedly called Bernie Falls the eighth wonder of the world. That is almost certainly an exaggeration, but it is not entirely hard to understand why a person standing in front of it might reach for that kind of language. MacArthur Bernie Falls Memorial State Park in Shasta County in Northern California is home to a 129-foot waterfall that does something unusual. It falls not just from the stream above, but also from dozens of springs embedded in the volcanic rock face itself. Groundwater seeps through the porous lava and emerges mid-waterfall, creating a curtain of water that flows constantly regardless of the season or the rainfall upstream. At its peak flow, Bernie Falls discharges approximately 100 million gallons of water per day. The effect is of a waterfall that appears to generate its own water, springs bleeding directly from the rock face at multiple points simultaneously, independent of what the creek above is doing. The pool at the base is clear enough to see the bottom. The surrounding forest is fern-covered and old growth, kept perpetually moist by the mist that rises from the falls year-round. The park is about an hour east of Redding and straightforward to reach from Interstate 5. It is not, technically speaking, difficult to get to. And yet Bernie Falls is one of those places that the vast majority of Californians have never visited and would struggle to place on a map. It deserves considerably more than it gets. Place 2, Morro Rock, Morro Bay, San Luis Obispo County. Rising 581 feet from the ocean at the entrance to Morro Bay Harbor, Morro Rock is a volcanic plug, the solidified core of an ancient volcano left exposed after millions of years of erosion stripped away everything around it. It is one of 9 such volcanic plugs that run in a line from San Luis Obispo to the coast, known locally as the 9 Sisters, or the Morros. The rock has been a navigational landmark for centuries. It appeared in Spanish maritime records as early as 1542, noted by Portuguese explorer Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo during his survey of the California coast. A Spanish fort was built near its base in the early 19th century. In the 20th century, its summit was used as a quarry, removing substantial portions of the top before the practice was halted and the site protected. It is now both a state historic landmark and a wildlife sanctuary. Peregrine falcons nest on Morro Rock annually. The California sea otter, a species hunted nearly to extinction in the 18th and 19th centuries, can be frequently spotted in the kelp beds of the harbor. Humpback whales pass through the bay seasonally, often close enough to see from shore. What makes Morro Rock worth including here is not that it's entirely unknown, it isn't, but that most people driving Highway 1 stop for a photograph and keep moving. The surrounding state beach, the harbor estuary, and the wetlands behind the town are among the more ecologically intact stretches of California coast. Almost nobody stays long enough to find that out. Place 1, Giant Rock, Landers, San Bernardino County. Just 3 miles north of the Integratron, in the same patch of Mojave Desert outside Landers, sits what is believed to be the largest freestanding boulder in North America. Giant Rock is 7 stories tall, approximately 25,000 tons of granite, and has sat in that spot for roughly 10,000 years. It was considered sacred by the indigenous peoples of the region, specifically the Serrano and Cahuilla, long before any other claims were made on it. In the 1930s, a German immigrant prospector named Frank Kritzer carved a network of rooms into the earth beneath the rock and lived there through the Depression. Kritzer died in 1942 in a confrontation with law enforcement when the dynamite he stored under the boulder exploded. George Van Tassel, the same man who built the Integratron, moved to Giant Rock in the late 1940s with his family, living in the rooms Kritzer had carved and operating a small airstrip. He held his annual giant rock spacecraft conventions at the base of the rock from the early 1950s through the 1970s, drawing tens of thousands of UFO enthusiasts over the course of nearly 2 decades. At its peak, the conventions attracted over 10,000 people to this remote desert site. In 2000, a large section of giant rock split away and fell, exposing bright white granite beneath the desert-patinated exterior. The exposed surface was quickly painted with murals that have since faded and been repainted multiple times. The Bureau of Land Management manages the surrounding area. There is no gate, no fee, no visitor center, and no cell signal. You drive out on a dirt road, and the rock is just there, the same size it has always been. California is very good at putting its best face forward. The state has been performing for tourists since before most of its cities existed. It knows how to sell a beach, a highway, a skyline, and most of what it sells is real. But under that performance, under the freeways and the Instagram beaches and the guidebook temples, there are places that nobody planned for tourists, places that happen by accident or obsession or stubbornness, and places that the state itself cannot quite explain. A man who dug underground for 40 years rather than leave. A boulder that a UFO enthusiast held conventions next to for 2 decades. A desert town that was supposed to be a ghost town and became an art museum instead. All 15 of the places on this list are real, all are accessible, and all are genuinely worth the drive. If you've been to any of them, or if we missed one that deserves to be here, say so in the comments. And if you want more of this, like this video and subscribe. We'll keep finding them.